At 7:12 a.m., 3 patrol cars screeched to a stop in front of my house, lights washing the neighborhood in red and blue, because a furious HOA president told 911 I was threatening the community. I hadn't raised my voice, broken a rule, or even stepped off my porch. I was holding a coffee, watching disbelief ripple through the street as officers approached with hands near holsters, while Karen stood behind them, smiling like she'd already won. This story didn't begin with sirens. It began weeks earlier, when our HOA decided it could invent laws. Parking rules changed overnight. Cameras appeared. Fines were slipped under doors like threats. Karen, newly elected and power-drunk, took it personally when I asked for written policy. Her eyes hardened. From that moment, every walk, every delivery, every visitor became suspicious activity in her notebook. The morning of the call, she stormed onto my driveway, phone recording, accusing me of running an illegal business from my garage. I calmly asked her to leave. She refused, shouted louder, and announced she was calling the police for everyone's safety. Neighbors peeked through, blinds as she performed outrage like theater, narrating lies for an audience she hoped would never fact-check. When officers arrived, Karen launched into her story, pointing at me as if I might explode. I kept my hands visible and answered questions politely, even as anger burned behind my ribs. Then the front door opened. My wife stepped outside, still in uniform, badge catching the morning sun. Conversation stopped. Radios crackled. One officer's posture shifted instantly, recognition cutting through the tension. Karen kept talking, unaware. My wife calmly introduced herself, identified her department, and asked what the emergency was. The officers exchanged looks that said everything. Questions turned sharper. Statements were clarified. The timeline collapsed. Karen's confidence leaked away as the truth surfaced. Piece by piece, right there on the driveway. By the time it ended, the sirens were gone. The street was quiet, and Karen stood alone with a phone full of evidence against herself. What happened next changed our HOA forever. That day spread fast. Group chats erupted, neighbors compared notes, and long-ignored complaints suddenly mattered. People who'd been fined unfairly found courage. Board meetings filled. Records were demanded. Karen's authority shrank under sunlight. I realized this wasn't just about us. It was about how easily power bullies silence quiet streets, and how quickly that changes when someone refuses to flinch, stays calm, and lets truth speak louder than accusations. Sirens or fear. This was the moment everything tipped. And the reason the next chapter reveals consequences no one in that HOA expected or could control after that. Morning changed all the rules, forever for everyone. By that evening, the neighborhood felt different. Like the air after a storm when everyone steps outside pretending nothing happened, but knowing everything did. The police report circulated faster than gossip. Karen's name wasn't flattering in it. Words like unsubstantiated, no threat observed, and misuse of emergency services stood out like warning signs. For the first time since she became HOA president, she went quiet. The HOA group chat exploded anyway. Screenshots of fines, photos of warning letters, and recordings of Karen confronting residents surfaced. People who had avoided meetings for years suddenly found their voices. Retired couples, young families, renters who thought they had no say. All of them realized something important. If she could call 911 on me, she could do it to anyone. The board tried damage control. An emergency meeting was announced for the following week, framed as community reassurance. Karen insisted on hosting it at the clubhouse, confident she could talk her way out like always. But the crowd that showed up wasn't the polite, bored audience she expected. Folding chairs ran out. People stood along the walls. Phones were raised, recording before the meeting even started. Karen opened with a shaky smile and a rehearsed apology that wasn't really an apology. She blamed stress. She blamed miscommunication. She blamed neighbors for escalating tensions. Then, she said something that snapped the room awake. She insisted she did nothing wrong calling the police because she felt unsafe. That's when my wife stood up. She didn't speak as a cop. She spoke as a resident, calm, measured, and impossible to interrupt. She explained what actually qualifies as an emergency. She explained how false reports waste resources and put people at risk. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. The room leaned toward her, absorbing every word like it mattered, because it did. Questions poured in after that. Karen couldn't answer most of them. Financial discrepancies came up. Unapproved cameras. Selective enforcement. Suddenly, the board members beside her looked nervous, flipping through papers like lifelines. One of them quietly resigned on the spot, citing personal reasons. Another asked for a recess that no one granted. By the end of the meeting, a vote was demanded. Karen objected, citing bylaws. Someone else read those bylaws aloud. Turns out, she'd been misquoting them for months. The vote happened anyway. It wasn't close. Karen lost her position that night. The room didn't cheer. It just exhaled. She left without looking at anyone, her authority gone, replaced by the quiet reality of consequences. But losing the HOA presidency wasn't the end of it. Not even close. Because when power slips, it doesn't just fall. It drags secrets with it. And what surfaced next would shock the entire neighborhood and draw attention far beyond our quiet street. 2 days after Karen was removed, a plain white envelope appeared in multiple mailboxes, including mine. No return address. Inside was a single-page letter and copies of HOA documents that most of us had never seen before. Budget summaries, violation logs, security camera invoices. At first glance it looked boring, but then patterns started to emerge. And once you saw them, you couldn't unsee them. Fines weren't random. They were targeted. Certain houses were cited repeatedly, while others were never touched. Late fees stacked on top of questionable violations. Legal consultation fees appeared in the budget with no corresponding records. Even worse, there were payments approved without full board consent, signed off solely by Karen under emergency authority. The same phrase she'd used when calling 911 on me. Neighbors began comparing envelopes. Everyone had received slightly different documents, like puzzle pieces meant to be assembled together. By that night, a shared folder was created online. People uploaded scans, timestamps, and old emails. Someone with an accounting background volunteered to review everything. Another neighbor contacted a local housing attorney. What started as anger turned into organized resolve. Karen, meanwhile, tried to regain control. She sent an email claiming the documents were stolen and manipulated. She threatened legal action against anyone who shared them. But the threats fell flat. Too many people had already saved copies. Too many questions were now public. Silence, which had protected her before, was gone. The HOA's management company distanced itself quickly, releasing a statement that they were unaware of internal misconduct. That phrase alone raised more red flags. The city got involved, then a mediator, then quietly an investigator. Official letters replaced rumor. Timelines mattered. So did signatures. I was asked to give a statement, not because of the 911 call, but because it showed a pattern of escalation and misuse of authority. My wife helped me prepare, reminding me to stick to facts. No emotion. No exaggeration. Just truth. It felt strange being calm about something that had once made my hands shake. Weeks passed. Karen stopped appearing in public spaces. Her house stayed dark. The cameras she'd installed came down one by one. A certified letter was taped to her door. Nobody celebrated. It wasn't that kind of victory. It was quieter, heavier. Then the final notice arrived. The HOA was being audited. The board dissolved temporarily, and a new election scheduled under city supervision. Karen's name was listed, not as president, but as a subject of review. What began as a false emergency call had unraveled an entire system of abuse. And in the last chapter, I'll tell you what happened when Karen finally tried to confront us one last time, and how the neighborhood responded when power knocked. Desperate and exposed, asking for sympathy it could no longer demand. The morning Karen returned was a mix of tension and disbelief. She parked her black SUV at the edge of the street, windows tinted, as if she were preparing for battle rather than conversation. A few neighbors watched from porches, whispers traveling faster than her engine. Some cameras were still up from precaution, others removed in defiance. It felt like the calm before a storm. She walked toward the old clubhouse, clutching a folder that looked suspiciously like her last attempt at proof. Her footsteps echoed through the empty lot as we, neighbors, some brave, some curious, gathered near the entrance. My wife stood beside me, badge hidden under a jacket, her presence more comforting than any weapon could be. Karen started talking before we even acknowledged her. Her voice was firm, but beneath it, there was a tremor, desperation disguised as confidence. She claimed the audit was unfair, that the city had been misled, and that her reputation had been maliciously tarnished. She demanded reinstatement and public apology. It was surreal. The same person who had weaponized 911 and tried to manipulate every corner of the HOA was now pleading for credibility, and she expected sympathy. The room didn't answer immediately. Eyes narrowed, phones in hands recording. This time the witnesses weren't intimidated. We weren't just documenting lies, we were ensuring accountability. Then my neighbor, a retired school principal, stepped forward. Calmly, he began reading from the official audit. Report, dates, signatures, violations, payments, everything Karen had tried to spin was exposed in cold, factual language. Her confidence began to crack. She flinched at the facts, her scripted responses faltering. When she tried to redirect blame, another neighbor raised the issue of the repeated fines and selective enforcement. Others joined in, sharing examples, emails, and photos. The chorus wasn't mean-spirited, it was irrefutable. The room, once silent in fear, now resonated with collective clarity. Karen realized her power had evaporated entirely. No badge, no camera, no shout could restore it. Finally, she stood alone in the sunlight, shoulders slumping, folder dropping to her feet. There was no dramatic exit, no furious shouting, just quiet acknowledgement that the game was over. The audit confirmed the board would remain dissolved until a full reorganization. Under city oversight, new elections would be fair, rules would be clear, and the neighborhood, once under the thumb of fear, had reclaimed itself. That day taught everyone watching something invaluable. Power built on intimidation and lies is temporary, but truth and community solidarity endures. Even a single calm presence, like my wife showing her badge that morning, can shift the balance. Accountability isn't about revenge. It's about restoring order, respect, and fairness. As neighbors cleaned up, cameras removed, and children played in yards once tense with fear, the feeling of relief was palpable. Karen's last attempt had failed, but the neighborhood had gained something far greater: awareness, unity, and a lasting lesson about standing firm when rules are twisted. And that's how a single 911 call became a catalyst for change that no HOA president could ignore. If you enjoyed this crazy HOA showdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling us what you would do if this happened in your neighborhood.